Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Julius Austin. I am the Sacramento Promise Zone Coordinator here in Sacramento, California. Our lead organization is the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. And on the behalf of the National Coalition of Promise Zones, I would like to welcome you to the third session of the National Coalition of Promise Zones 2020 Federal Convening. The presentation is titled Opportunity Zones, Strategies for Community Leaders. So we are really thankful to have a really awesome panel who will speak towards the topic of opportunity zones. Without further ado, I am going to turn over things to Grant, our awesome moderator. But before I do that, actually, before I introduce you to Grant, let me give you a couple logistical items. I want to notify you that this session will be recorded. I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. Also, we are asking all participants to please remain on mute throughout the duration of the presentation. There will be opportunities for participants to ask questions or make comments throughout the session in the chat box, and the moderators and the presenters will be checking the chat box, and they will pose the questions to the presenters as we go. All right, with that being said, I would like to turn it over to Grant, our moderator for today, and he will announce himself and announce our awesome panel today.
Thank you, Julius. I appreciate it. I've been able to participate, attend the morning and afternoon sessions on the East Coast, and it was really fantastic, and I hope that we can continue that trend. I appreciate it. Grant McFan. I'm a management analyst with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Indianapolis Field Office. I work on the Promise Zones Initiative, but I also work on the Opportunity Zones Initiative, and pulled together a panel that I think will be able to offer a lot of insight to your communities on how to leverage that designation to improve conditions and quality of life. I kind of look at this as the second stage in a conversation that we started last year as part of the Evansville Federal Convening for the Evansville Promise Zone. Last year, we left with a first step, which was to organize, get your community organized in order to take advantage of the designation. And I hope to leave today with a whole series of steps, effectively a step-by-step roadmap for fully deploying the designation in your communities. And so that would look like organizing a marketing plan or a marketing pitch for your community, cultivating a project pipeline, identifying public incentives to support the initiative, and recruiting private capital for the projects. So we are very lucky to have a panel of experts on opportunity zones that span the country and span industry. And each panelist will speak about their experience with opportunity zones through the lens of their organization and their personal experience. And they'll offer particular emphasis on a component of operationalizing the designation in order to make it a valuable tool in the community. Dr. Bo Ballou is professor of rural and regional development in the Department of Agricultural Economics at Purdue University, and is the former director of the Purdue Center for Regional Development. Bo has played a major role in the launch of a number of innovative national research and extension programs across the nation, including the Rural Opportunity Zones Initiative. Dennis Foldenauer is the area director in the U.S. Economic Development Administration's Chicago Regional Office. Dennis leads a team that processes and manages both construction and non-construction economic development awards through the 6-state EDA Chicago region. Previously, Dennis served as the Regional Export Finance Manager for the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of International Trade. Eric Yost is a management analyst for community initiatives with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Los Angeles Field Office. Eric is an urban entrepreneur with expertise in place-based initiatives and urban revitalization, building public-private partnerships. He's a national expert on opportunity zones, having co-authored the one-year report on opportunity zones for the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, and the best practices report that was delivered to the president. Samantha Spurgel is the Director of Real Estate Strategic Initiatives and Engagement for the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, where she provides policy oversight on numerous U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development construction programs, and oversees consolidated planning, manages technical assistance and capacity building, targeting units of local government and nonprofits. Sam has been interviewed by multiple publications about her experience facilitating and structuring Opportunity Zone projects, and is a critical member of the Indiana Opportunity Investment Consortium. So before we dive in, just to establish a run of show, I'm going to attempt to get us all on the same page with respect to the theory of opportunity zones. And then I'll pass the baton to each of the presenters to speak about their experience and component of operationalizing the designation. And then we'll come back together to pose questions to the panel. And so, as Julius mentioned, if you could place those in the chat and keep a running log and come back to the panelists with those after we finish the presentations. So allow me, if I could, to share kind of the theory of opportunity zones. Hopefully. All right. So opportunity zones were a designation that was created by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And it provides two significant advantages to the census tracts that were designated by the U.S. Treasury upon nomination by the governors of each state. And those two advantages are tax incentives that encourage investment in real estate and business development in the census tract that are the opportunity zones, and preference for competitive federal funding and favorable policy treatment to projects that occur in those census tracts that are opportunity zones. So walking along the path of an investor, those existing investors with assets or investment that have appreciated over time, and gained in value, can theoretically take that gain in their existing investment and put that into an investment fund that was specifically organized to invest in opportunity zones. Looking and walking through the designation from the perspective of a community, the preference for federal funding and favorable policy treatment provides bonus points and special consideration on competitive federal funding applications that then local organizations and partnerships can compete for and win investments in their communities from federal government. That would then generate local momentum and foster a climate that stimulates real estate and business development opportunities. At that point, when those opportunities arise for business and real estate development, the opportunity fund, or the new vehicle through which the capital gains were reinvested by an investor, would then be able to invest those old capital gains into new projects, into real estate and business development opportunities in the opportunity zone. Theoretically then, communities would be improved by job creation, growing household wealth, and by quality of life improvements in the neighborhood that would affect and improve the quality of life for all neighborhood residents. So I think we're all aware. Theory is in practice, and so there's always opportunities for things to improve and to change. And the secret to making the designation work is in making that ROI actually be achieved and putting the theory into practice is to follow this play-by-play roadmap that we'll walk through at this point. So I'm going to pass this to Bo, and Bo will walk through organizing a marketing pitch for opportunity zones. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. I apologize. I was muted, as most people are on Zoom when you ask us to move over. Can everybody see this okay, Grant? Is it all right?
Sure can.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining this session. Again, I'm Bo Ballou at the Purdue Center for Regional Development at Purdue University. I want to talk a little bit about an effort we've undertaken in Indiana called the Rural Opportunity Zones Initiative, or what we have fondly called ROSI. I want to give you a little bit of background information about why we began this initiative and what some of the building blocks are that are needed in order to be able to really build the kind of investment prospectus or to market a plan that might attract some private sector investment. And then I want to give you an example of one of the communities we've been working with and the way in which they've formulated an investment prospectus that aligns with the kind of recommendations that we've offered to them. So let me tell you what the reason why that we started this. I remember reading in an article in Governing in 2019, the statement was made by a CEO that opportunity zones are not likely to really take off or flourish in rural areas of the nation, even if there were some incentives associated with private sector investors, the qualified opportunity fund managers. And the reason why is because this individual said, opportunity zones are largely going to be an urban activity. It's going to attract a lot more capital to urban areas. I know many of you on the call are with HUD or have been associated with HUD, probably have more of an urban community. But I want to share with you that we weren't going to give up on rural areas in Indiana. And the reason why is this. Our governor selected 156 opportunity zones in the state. As you know, as Grant indicated, these are all selected by the governors of each state. And according to our definition, 46 of those are what we would call rural. In this context would mean primarily non-metropolitan counties. They were embedded in counties that have no community of 50,000 or more. So we felt we cannot abandon these 46. We can't let this CEO essentially make the argument that we forget about rural Indiana. So we really wanted to make sure that rural Indiana had a fair shake at trying to get the kinds of investment it needed to be able to really be able to progress over time. We started this initiative with funding from USDA Rural Development as part of their Rural Business Development Grant. They gave us a grant to help launch this effort. And we did this for three reasons. One is that like a lot of communities that have been affected, who are impoverished, most of the work has been overshadowed by the rural areas. Rural areas have been overshadowed by some of the work investments happening in urban areas. That's where most of the private sector investment has been made. Like anything else, rural areas have not quite totally recovered from the Great Recession. There's always been a lag factor, so we wanted to deal with that. And we felt that if we failed to deal with rural areas, that they would continue to essentially be farther and farther behind. It'd be more difficult to really get them back on the track for sustainability. So what I want to share with you this afternoon is kind of the process that we undertook to really initiate the Rural Opportunity Zone Initiative. I do want to say that I think this process is not necessarily rural-based. It's something that actually would have equal application in urban neighborhoods that may be part of the promise zones or urban neighborhoods that also are part of the opportunity zones. So one thing we want to do is, first of all, is educate, to build awareness about the existence of the opportunity zone legislation. It's amazing to us how many local economic development organizations or community leaders simply had no awareness or knowledge of this program. So we did webinars and did our social media and email lists to really educate the individuals about this and to invite them to a webinar to know more about it. And that was really quite effective. We then targeted all 46 of those opportunity zones and say, look, we have a competitive grants program. We want to select 6 different sites to be part of this inaugural or pilot effort. And we had more than enough applications, and we selected 6. The next thing we asked them to do is to establish a local task force. We wanted to make sure that this was not something that was being done to opportunity zones, but it would be something that in which the opportunity zone businesses and residents would have a full voice in helping frame the kind of investments to be made. We then provided some significant data on their opportunity zone, and to ensure that we had a larger voice of people weighing in, we hosted community focus groups of people, business leaders, health sector, education, local government, whatnot, coupled with businesses and residents who are embedded in those particular opportunity zones. And then we did capacity building. How can you, we want to make sure that they had the tools to be able to really build a strong investment prospectus. And that means we had to spend time with them, really giving them the tools, the data, the process and whatnot to really feel confident in their ability to build an investment prospectus. We were doing this face-to-face until COVID-19 hit, and we had to change everything around and make it all virtual, which has gone very, very well. We've done all virtual workshops now with our sites. They were then working on building an investment prospectus and then marketing. That's so you can see before we get to marketing, there's a lot of things that had to be done before we get to that point. And now we're in the process of how we can connect them not only to the qualified opportunity funds that may be interested in their projects, but how can we also look at grant opportunities that might provide some additional leveraging for these investments. So just very briefly, this is the process. This is the investment prospective guidelines we proposed for them. And we did this largely because they had no idea how to shape this prospectus. And we did a lot of work looking at various places that had investment prospectus documents. Some of them were very good. Some of them were not very great at all. They were very poorly designed. So we took the best of what we thought would be relevant to our sites. It talked about a brief history about the community, a letter from an official. We talked about what are some of the data about the community that really makes it really attractive as a place to invest. And then we asked them to select just 2 projects because they're rural. We want to make sure they didn't overwhelm themselves. We told them this is not a strategic plan for the community or for that zone. It's really the beginning of launching an investment effort in those sites. So we asked them to select 2 major projects to focus on, talk about the way in which the community really had a voice, had a real buy-in. So we talked about making sure that investors knew this was not a concoction of a couple people, but this truly represent the voices and the perspectives of the community. Then we talked about why does it make sense to invest in our prospectus, in this prospectus in that community. Obviously, some of the federal and state investment benefits, as well as what's the local community, what buy-in, what are they putting in terms of skin in the game with regard to investments, and then the key people to involve, to be the contact people. So next thing is really to talk about what we're doing now, as we're talking about how can we explore grants. We've identified for them a number of different grants that are available at the state level in particular, as well as through the philanthropic community. So we gave them, these are things that are there already, and how can we best fit these projects to the things we already have in the state. You know, you're going to hear from Sam in a minute. Her agency has a lot of funding that might be available, a good fit for any site that might be looking at housing, multifamily housing. The next thing is really the prospectus. This is really kind of a sampling of what that's looking like in one of our sites, a community of only about just a small number of people, less than 3,000, a town of Kentland. You can see that they have emulated much of the model that we've identified. So it has the key steps. It talks about how the community had a buy-in. And then we get to the projects. And this is how they begin to visualize what they're really looking for in terms of investors. And we talk about they're looking at an intergenerational wellness campus that's constituted of 3 phases. One would be senior living housing, which made sense because that county is really growing in terms of aging population. They also need childcare for younger families and a wellness center that would accommodate the healthcare needs of all ages, both senior citizens as well as children. So that's one of the projects they're looking at, and they've really made some quite progress on that. So what's the marketing effort we're underdoing right now? We're working closely with our state agencies and federal agencies to look at what kind of funding might be marshaled to help support the grants of these projects that make sense in terms of their investment. Obviously, we have an Opportunity Investment Consortium in Indiana that can showcase the effort. We're reaching out to managers of qualified opportunity funds, highlighting this through various websites like the Economic Innovation Group. And we're also looking through all of our partners, our center, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, Indiana Housing and Community Development, all the different partners who can communicate this information through their channels. Community foundations, for those of you who aren't familiar with Indiana, we have a community foundation in all 92 counties. They can become a conduit for helping invest locally in these activities, especially if they have individuals who are coming to them and say, I have money, I want to invest. They can say, hey, we have a great project few in our opportunity zone that might be a good fit. We're working with consultants who have expertise in the opportunity zones. And finally, we're saying the community may very well want to invest because somebody may not be necessarily looking for return on investment, but maybe trying to find a way to make their community better. And this would become a vehicle to creating a qualified opportunity fund that's being supported through local contributions. This is just a couple of websites or examples of what we're talking about, the one in Indiana as well as the one in the Economic Innovation Group. And finally, that said, I just wanted to do this very quickly so you can get a real sampling of what we're trying to do here in Indiana. Thank you so much, and I'll stop sharing this so we can be ready for the next person.
Thank you, Bo. I really appreciate sharing all of that. Can you give folks a sense for how frequently a community should revisit their marketing documents in order to keep them relevant to investors?
Well, obviously, right now we're just trying to get them to do the first one, but it would seem that those things should probably be updated probably every 6 months, because the hope is that you would have individuals coming in who are beginning to, it almost takes on a life of its own. When you begin to see some energy going into projects, then I think you want to continue to say, look, we've already got these investments. We're really getting there. We need to have more investments. Again, we're really looking a lot at local because we want to make sure that external investors say there's clearly people in this community and organizations who are putting things really on the line for these projects. And we want to make sure that that's being recognized.
Bo, and I know your time is tight, I think, so we'll pose another question, and then if you need to jump off, please.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Oh, all right, great. Can you talk about exit strategy and investors and how important that is? Sandy and Kurt in Kentucky posed a question about the importance of exit strategy to investors when they're looking at development opportunities.
Well, Clay, no, I'm not an opportunity zone expert in terms of that side of it. So, which is why we always want to hand it off to somebody who has much more of the long-term projections about, as you know, keeping it in for 10 years, as you've indicated, Grant, is really the ideal. The exit, we're really trying to make sure they realize, keep in mind that these investors want to be able to make some money, right? They want to be able to have the appreciation of value so they don't have to pay anything on that new appreciated value. It's tax-free. So I said, you got to look at that too. Don't go for a project that's likely to not have much return on investment. So that's what we're constantly striving. So as far as the exit strategy, maybe beyond my pay grade here in terms of knowing when's the right time to exit. But again, we always want to remind people, it's got to be something that's going to draw external investors because they've got to be able to see the value of it as far as a qualified opportunity fund.
Great, that's helpful. Well, I appreciate it. We're going to move to Dennis Foldenauer with Economic Development Administration. And Dennis will speak about EDA's focus on opportunity zones and development pipelines. And Dennis, if you're able to share your screen, that'd be great.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Grant, can you confirm you're seeing that slide deck in front of you?
I am.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us for, I think, what's an important discussion about something that has been brewing for a long time and kind of has come to fruition. I think when you look at the ability for 8,800 census tracts in the country, there has to be some value there for pretty much everybody. And I think over time, if we see this program, kind of come to be what I think that the founders of the program really wanted to be, I think there will be utilization in a majority of those tracts around the country. I think when you look at EDA, what Bo talked about was a prospectus, essentially setting out what the goals are for a given opportunity zone. And I think EDA comes at economic development in a similar way. We try to think about economic development strategic planning with our comprehensive economic development strategies, with our partnership planning program. Try to get communities to understand what are their goals with respect to economic development and how do we get there? What are the projects that we want to do to achieve this? So similar, similar to what those prospectuses are, in the sense that our economic development strategies are the product of a community planning process. I think it's important to note that for the prospectuses, they're really trying to attract investors. So it's a different kind of thing. We would never want to conflate economic development planning with the kinds of goals that you would have with a prospectus like what Bo showed us. But I think in terms of creating a project pipeline, thinking about what are those projects that now we take from the prospectus or from our economic development strategy for the region, how do we get those into fruition? How do we get them in operation and start creating jobs as a result? You know, this is a slide that crystallizes how EDA gets involved, that we're trying to do all the things that the opportunity zones are really trying to achieve as well. So I think the biggest thing for EDA when we talk about projects is if this is an EDA project that we're talking about, the opportunity zone really opens up the door to EDA assistance for that project, at least in terms of distress. We look to the opportunity zones as opportunities to be able to address what are these special needs that we have in our notice of funding opportunity to fund projects. And so I think together with the prospectus that Bo showed us, and that's a familiar example, I thought, the senior living facility and the mixed use, I think multi-tenant housing is one of the best opportunities for these zones, for the kinds of benefits that we're hoping to see out of them. EDA doesn't get too close to that. You know, we're working in the industrial space. We're working in the innovation space at university labs. We're working in acceleration, working with venture funds and things like that. So when we look at housing, EDA is just not going to be part of a development like that. But certainly those opportunity zones, I would think, even with other programs, have opened up the door to federal assistance for these new boundaries that we've drawn. But I do want to say, for anyone that has what would look like an EDA project that is located in an opportunity zone, it creates this eligibility. So an otherwise non-distressed community could access EDA funding by putting projects in those opportunity zones. You know, it's an investment priority, so that even catalyzes more interest, at least from our review committee when we're looking at all the grants to fund. You know, if this is an opportunity zone, that carries extra weight for us. Certainly in the strategic plan, you know, working together with what Department of Commerce is trying to do, what the White House is trying to do, what all the federal partners in the room and elsewhere are trying to do with these opportunity zones. And I think when we look at this, it's a great opportunity for EDA to get involved with other agencies. So we have economic development integration as one of our activities. We have a person in every regional office that goes out and talks to other federal agencies that are involved in economic and community and housing and environmental and all these other things that play a role in making an economy and a community work. That person really tries to bring those organizations and administrations together to try to make, in some cases, these opportunity zones as fruitful as possible for the communities where they're designated. When you think about what EDA is doing, you know, just because what you're trying to do in your community with an opportunity zone doesn't necessarily line up with what EDA is doing, I think that when you're looking to your regional economic development strategies and other things that, you know, you're trying to do, if this opportunity zone that's in your community is part of that planning process, that can maybe change around what was the understanding if we hadn't considered that. So, you know, I'm always in favor. We're the Economic Development Administration, founded on this planning effort, going back, and as I think someone else said, looking at those plans and saying with new opportunities, with new designations, like opportunity zones, adjusting what our strategy is. Maybe this makes more sense for this, given this new change to our reality. You know, when EDA is trying to get involved, though, if we were talking about EDA projects and opportunity zones, they would refer to workforce development. So I was in Cleveland. I saw a project where they had done workforce housing, and across the street they had put in a workforce development center, a facility totally devoted to workforce development. And so you saw how this opportunity zone could connect with what the investors were interested in, but but also what community service providers were offering in the form of the workforce training. Always interested in exports and FDI. You know, I think that that's an interesting concept when we look at FDI, the attractiveness for foreign companies to have holdings in opportunity zones, maybe something to look at for people who are interested in developing theirs. And certainly critical infrastructure. That's where EDA really bread and butter. If you're doing something with road, water, and sewer that refers to industrial, other kind of manufacturing type activities, EDA, you know, that's something that we're always interested in. If, to the extent that that's happening in an opportunity zone, I think that's great. We have some other slides here, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time on. Essentially, these are all of EDA's grant programs, but the conversation doesn't really revolve around the application process or what program we're applying under. It's a conversation with our economic development representatives. We're very hands-on in that sense. I think when you're talking about EDA projects that refer to opportunity zones, it's going to be a conversation either with Kyle Darton for Indiana or Carl Unger, our integrator, like I referenced earlier, talking about how does this project qualify for what EDA is doing? Is it an EDA investment priority? Do you have this special need? Is it located in an opportunity zone? Or are you otherwise distressed with low per capita income, et cetera? Do you have an economic development strategy, either developed by one of our economic development district partners or by someone on their own initiative there in your region, looking at what is our long-term strategic approach to growing jobs and private investment in this region? You know, we're certainly making investments in these opportunity zones. I don't want to say that just because so much of what's happening relates to housing, that doesn't mean EDA is not there. We have a lot of active projects in opportunity zones, and I think that they're the kinds of things that we discussed. Workforce training, hard infrastructure to support job creation. In some cases, these revolving loan funds, all of those are the kinds of things that EDA would really look to as having at least indicia of competitiveness and a conversation with our representative. Talking a little bit about revolving loan funds, those are funds that we capitalize with nonprofits that make loans. I think that's a need that's more relevant than ever in the aftermath of the pandemic. And I think that our Build to Scale program, where it's a national competition, for any of you all who are interested in that, we just finished up our 2020 competition, but we're looking to have a special CARES Act competition. Anyone that's trying to create seed funds, anyone that's trying to grow cluster activity in your region, those are programs you might want to consider. And then, a brief summary here. I think we have a lot of great resources. Statsamerica.org is a special website EDA developed specifically for research around clusters, around disaster recovery, around opportunity zones. And so we have a map on there that'll show you pretty clearly where the opportunity zones are, and it's some other tools that are available on statsamerica.org. Check them out. A couple more resources just on philosophically how we're trying to integrate everybody. The ability of communities to come together and look at economic diversification. And then finally, this is the most important slide, everybody. Just give whoever this is that applies to you, if you're in Indiana, Kyle Darton, give him a call and start a conversation about what it means to EDA. Thanks, everybody, and thanks especially for the opportunity to discuss it.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm curious, in my experience working with EDA, you seem to make decisions about how to invest your funds that are similar kind of almost to a financial institution in the way that you kind of consider projects and have criteria by which you evaluate their readiness to proceed. And in the sense that of evaluating projects for a project pipeline for opportunity zones and like readying those projects to be invested in, whether it's through public investment or private investment. What are some critical indications or criteria that you look to a project to know that when you put your funds into it, that it's going to go forward? What are some like things that need to be checked off the list before a project is ready for a hard costs investment from EDA?
The hardest thing is it's dollars and cents. It's dollars and cents. You really have to have, the term that I've heard that's in vogue right now is capital stack. And so to the extent that you're working with investors who are going to build a building, but you also need hard infrastructure that's going to be owned by the city, and you have other foundations that might be supporting operations that support whatever this development is going to look like. All those partners have to come together. Naturally, the federal government is going to be the most cautious. And so I think that that conversation can start very early with Kyle and say, hey, Kyle, I'm hearing about something that, if all of this comes together, fingers crossed, this could be something. Then Kyle can say, all right, well, think about this and that, and then proceed along in that conversation. There are engagements that I know he has over years. So it's never too early to discuss possibilities. But I think when that funding is all lined up, then we say go, and we're pretty efficient on the back end. Once an award is made, we're not going to hold up any kind of construction or activities associated with that.
And is there a question posed from Minnesota, Jake Ackervik, is there a way to determine whether an applicant should apply for CARES Act EDA funds versus regular EDA funds, or should they just approach it as one thing and just contact their representative?
Well, I'm smiling because there is a difference. It's just like we say when we get disaster funding now. So a natural disaster occurs and we get a supplemental appropriation to help recover. And people will come in and say, well, I was hit by the disaster. Now give me some assistance, please. And we say, okay, what is the project's relationship to the effects of the disaster? And they say, well, I don't know. We say, well, that's important to us because if we're building a new industrial park, we want to know how this helps that community recover from the natural disaster. And we think about that as a nexus. What is the nexus between the eligibility for the project, the disaster, and what we're trying to do? And that's even more critical with CARES Act funding. It creates a different set of considerations for us because if the effects in a community were one way, we would respond in a given way. But if the community was hit in a different way by the pandemic, we might have different responses and different things would look competitive to us. So it's just for us, a more complex analysis because every community is going to be able to tell a story about how that impacted and then what they want to do as a result.
That's helpful. I appreciate it. We'll move now to Eric Yost in HUD's Los Angeles field office. And he will speak about public incentives that support opportunity zones. So Dennis, if you can stop your screen share and we'll move to Eric.
Absolutely. Sorry about that.
Perfect. No, you're great. Thank you very much.